want, I can repeat what I just said. That's
Yeah,
important background, I think.
I think we started recording. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So, I was the kid who did the least necessary to get a grade that I thought was acceptable. And my family, anything lower than a B would have been a problem. An A for me was I put too much work into it and essentially wasted my time. And so I very much focused on getting a B with the least amount of effort necessary. Again, I mentioned a moment ago that in high school, I remember many times seeing my grades and knowing that I had a really high A and realizing that I didn't have to do any more work in that class for the entire semester. Calculating in great detail, like what grade I would need to get on the final in order to keep a B if I had a strong A. Like anyway,
You,
just
you did more work
all
in
of
calculating the grades than you did in obtaining them.
absolutely. In fact, actually, that was the most valuable math I've done in high school because I've never used algebra or calculus or anything like that. But I definitely have done analyses of basic math throughout my career. So I was that kid, and I know a lot of kids like me who what's the grade I need to do in order to get by and to not have too much heat brought on me, and I'll just hit that grade. So that was me. Just kind of through the work of a teacher, applied to college. Again, didn't really have any interest in life after high school or college, but ended up getting a scholarship because I did score fairly well on some of the tests. Went to school and then proceeded to not know why I was there, and for the first 2 years, just pissed off that entire experience. I burned a lot of bridges. I lost my scholarship. I broke my finger in a drunken stupor, just over and over again, just not ready, not having any reason to be there. And after 2 years, I decided, well, maybe if I'm here, I might as well actually put forth some effort because my choices at that moment were I'm either going to need to drop out and get to work or I'm going to need to do something else. And so I decided to, try to invest in college. And from that point on, really, it was me deciding I actually want to learn some stuff and figure out what I wanted to learn about. I loved medicine and healthcare and administration and management. Got super involved with the university, began to extract value from the university that had nothing to do with classes. Did internships, was ended up being elected to our student body as student body president. That was my best learning experience about management. And from that point on, went into healthcare administration. When my son was born, I was the youngest director at a very large hospital here in Houston. I was making really good money, but my priorities shifted dramatically when my son was born. Having a black boy born in the United States is scary, and I wanted to make sure that we erred on the side of caution. And I ended up leaving my job to the surprise of all of my staff. Has a team of 200 people. Was being considered for some promotions and left the job to stay at home with my son. And that was the best decision I've made, second best decision aside from marrying my wife. But it was also the hardest decision to leave a really well-paid job where I got a bunch of positive, acclaim, a lot of trappings in that job. But once I left, I realized that healthcare was just a job. And I began to search for what is it that I actually felt called to do. Moved into philanthropy, did a lot of work with families, and began to focus more and more on what I believe is my calling, which is working with families, particularly in the intersection of the child, the parent, and these different systems in which parents are forced to operate: education, healthcare, governmental systems, etc. And parents are generally, I won't say victimized, but pretty close. By the way, I'm in a coffee shop, so I hope this background noise is
No
not too
worries.
problematic.
No worries.
All right. And since that point, since about 2011, I ended up leading an education nonprofit. I left philanthropy to lead up an education nonprofit, formed it Empowering Families, and then have been a consultant for school districts since that time, and then ended up doing a lot of one-on-one, small group parent engagement, parent support. And now I am a huge advocate for the entire educational system being, not the entire educational system, but a good chunk of the educational system being a monumental waste of time, that young people are capable of doing and learning at their own pace, the areas of interest to them, the curriculums that are developed by well-meaning adults disempower and uninspire millions of young people. And I think right now we've got a world that's in need of a ton of positive energy, a ton of problem-solving capacity. And I think we're missing it because a lot of young people aren't given the freedom to tackle some of these big problems that my generation and generations past have put together. And so now I'm trying to advocate for changing the educational system. I help parents think about how to exit the system of education, how to give their children more educational and learning freedom, how to inspire their child to take ownership of their own education. That's what I'm all about now. And it's a lonely work, but it's also work that I feel compelled to do. I make a little money doing it. Thankfully, we have managed our finances well, so we don't need a ton of income. And frankly, I don't make a ton of income from this type of work, but it is a place that I would do for free and will do for until I'm put in the grave, I believe. So that's kind of my journey. There's a whole personal side of it, which is my own kids' education and how my experience with the traditional education system taught me how to really hack that system. I didn't mention, by the way, that I have been on the board of 10 educational institutions, from a public selective university to a private college to a public K-12 public high school, 2 charter schools, a Head Start system, a couple private schools. I've seen almost every model of education from a governance point of view, and most of them just don't work. They do not inspire kids. They do not let kids prepare for this 21st century. It's just it's largely daycare and keeping kids safe until such time they turn 18, and then they're thrown into a world that's going to chew them up and spit them out. So that's my background. I know I was a bit long, but that's it. Again, I can happy to talk more about my own personal journey with my kids and how they have benefited from this kind of learning, etc. So that's about it.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. So many interesting things that happen. I want to take you back to your decision of leaving the hospital and becoming, I guess, at the time, a full-time dad. How did that decision took place? Like, what were you thinking? I'm sure it must have been like a very, very difficult decision to make for you. So, what was your mindset
very.
at the time?
Yeah, my mindset was I love my work, but I'm really worried about my son. And if part of what's interesting is like strategy thinking is something that I learned through my work. And one of the big strategies is you think about where you want to be and then work backwards, right? So think about the end goal and then work backwards. That's a Stephen Covey strategy. And when I thought about the end goal, I wanted a family and kids that were highly prepared for a world that I saw that was really starting to change quickly. And I had enough exposure to the traditional educational model to realize that model doesn't prepare kids for a world that's in constant flux. It prepares kids for 1975, a world where you can generally expect to work at 1 or 2 jobs for 30 years, and that world is long gone, long gone. So, and then there's another element, which is having a black boy in the United States of America, the threats to him personally are unique, and the threats to his mind, the social threats like him believing that he's not capable. That's a threat. And that happens from being around people who look at him and assume that because he's a black boy, he's not capable of all sorts of things. Or I was afraid of my son believing that because he's a black boy, the best path to adulthood was professional sports or becoming a rapper, which is the dominant belief system in a lot of black boys here in the States. Hell no, my son was not going that path. My son was going to realize the capacity that was built within him, that was knitted within him from our Creator. And the only way that that was going to happen, in my view, was for me to take personal ownership of my child's education. And that meant me sacrificing a ton in order to make that happen. I will tell you that he's meeting almost every expectation, every dream I had for him. Super, super, super creative, super smart, like wise as a 20-year-old. I mean, I'm just amazed at this young man, and I'm also the sacrifices were worth it. So that's some of what was operating in my back, the back of my mind. And if I had to do it all over again, I would absolutely leave work. There would be a lot I would do differently in the upbringing of my child, but there's no way I would continue working the job that took me away from being very involved in my child's life.
So when you did decide to become a full-time dad, how did you, what was your game plan? Like how did you raise your children?
Yeah. So didn't have a really great game plan. And part of the story here that I didn't share with you was, so after I left and, was beginning to become a full-time dad, we had figured out our finances from early on. There's a guy named Dave Ramsey who does a lot of personal finance coaching on the radio and online. And we followed his playbook. And so early on, we were in a really strong financial position because we just weren't spending a lot of money. We were saving a lot of money. We were getting out of debt, etc. So when it came time for me to consider leaving, it wasn't a huge financial hit, but it wasn't going to take our family underwater, right? When he hit, so I didn't really have a plan, just that I was going to invest. I was going to, help him learn and become a lover of learning. How to do that, I was unclear about. So I talked to a whole bunch of folks who were much wiser than I, parents who were in the homeschool community, former educators, some administrators of schools who have said to me in private that the system doesn't work, and here's how the system, imperils young people, particularly Black boys. So I took all this information and kind of pieced it together, and what we ended up doing was focusing on learning to love reading. So we read a lot together. We listened to stories together. We talked about these stories together. We talked a lot about the society we're in and the problems that we see in society, and the homelessness that we see down the street from our house, or the trash, or the pollution. We would just constantly be talking about these issues as sources of learning. And as they got older, they began to be more involved in some hybrid educational models. So spending a day a week or 2 days per week in a traditionally structured educational model, but one that was highly focused on reading. That's part of our journey as well. But ultimately, as the parent, I had to separate the idea that school was the best place to learn. I had to separate that idea from the idea that the community, family and community, are actually the best place to learn. Separating from the idea that grades matter to coming to the new idea that the child's curiosity, the child's knowledge of self, the child's belief in their own ability to make change, positive change, that matters more. So that was the transition. And again, this was something we were doing on the fly, without a lot of support. Now there's a lot more supports in place to help parents figure this out, thankfully. And that's part of what I actually do, is to help parents learn how to make that transition from the old model to something new.
Awesome. Yeah. So right now you run, I think, a few different companies. So I know about Jay and I know about the education game, but there's also, I think, 2 or 3 other companies that you run. So what do they do exactly, and how do you divide your work between them?
Yeah, I don't divide it well. I'll tell you.
I mean, that's good. I
it's
mean,
been a little.
if the brands feed into each other, it becomes an ecosystem. So that's not bad.
There is a bit of an ecosystem that's built. It wasn't intentional, unfortunately. I wish I could say that I was, you know, smart enough to think in that way. But what most of my work is really centered around the parent. Okay, so if we think about the parent is the decision maker for the child between ages 0 and say 12. I mean, parents are making 90% of those decisions and I'm talking when the child's going to wake up, what they're going to eat, what they're going to do during their free time. Is there going to be a television on? Are they going to have a screen available? Are they going to go to school? If so, which school? When are they going to wake up? Those are all parent-driven activities. And so my issue is I focus on talking to parents. And right now, I don't see a lot of people who are really talking to parents. I see a lot of people complaining about parents, but not a lot of people talking to parents. And so when I talk to parents, I'm listening and talking. And I'm hearing advice and guidance from them. Some parents who have done great with their children, some parents who've really struggled, and I'm listening for themes. The themes that I hear are really consistent and really powerful. One is the engagement of the parent early on in the early years of the child. Second theme is the increased freedom given to the child as the child ages up. And there's where my drive around self-directed learning comes, because a child who is learning how to drive their own learning doesn't need anybody to sit over their shoulder and tell them what to do and develop a curriculum for them, etc. So that's kind of the education game work. And it's all around parents and helping parents kind of shift their thinking. The Youth Entrepreneurship Award is an initiative that's trying to let parents see that young people can solve problems, can start businesses, can lead in a way that I didn't realize was possible when I was coming up with my kids. But it is possible. Not only is it possible, but it releases all this positive energy in the minds of these kids. They're like, I am now starting my own business, right? I just made $1. That's fantastic. I'm going to see if I can make 2 tomorrow. Or I'm fighting for this social issue that I care about. And so I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do research, not because someone tells me to do it, but because this is actually something I care about. So that's what the Youth Entrepreneurship Award is. We're trying to celebrate young people who are leading and changing, starting social businesses, starting for-profit businesses at radically young ages. And we've got some applicants who are 7 years old up to 17 or 18 years old. And it's really inspiring to see.
You also got one 6-year-old.
Oh, we got a 6-year-old, exactly. Yeah, so this stuff can happen radically early if the parent gives the child that freedom and encouragement, and it's amazing what's possible as a result. So the education game is again focused on parents. The Youth Entrepreneurship Award is focused on young people, but trying to message to parents, young people are capable. Give them freedom, give them the encouragement to lead themselves. Some other things I'm doing are I have this weekly conversation for dads. Dads are generally out, at least in the United States, they're out of the game of education. They just are not even having conversations about it. And so we're trying to spawn more discussions for dads where they can start thinking about what role they want to play. And I think there's a really interesting moment now, COVID, with all the changes that are happening in society due to technology largely, but also social change. The need for strategy now has never been more important. And when I talk to a dad about strategy, they can get kind of excited about that. When I talk to them about curriculum, they're not that interested. But if I talk about, all right, let's be strategic. Where do you want your child to be? What are the threats that are out there? Let's do a SWOT analysis on your child. A lot of dads are like, I'm in. Let's talk about that. So I think there's an interesting moment where dads can re-engage around what the future of learning should look like, whether they will or not is something that we're trying to support. I've done some other things too, like started a consulting business working within schools, but I've shut that down because generally speaking, schools don't want engaged parents, because engaged parents, COVID, they're kind of a pain in the ass to a school. I've had conversations with parents about their child having a permanent substitute. Have you heard this term before?
No, I
Yeah.
haven't.
So permanent substitute is when the teacher, the head of the class, is a substitute, but they're going to be there all year. There's no expectation that that person is a professional educator or knows their topic at all. And that's really common in a lot of the lower income schools. And so if I'm a parent of a kid in that classroom, I'm engaged, I'm going to go to the administration and say, no, my child is not going to have a permanent substitute. My child is not going to watch movies every day in class. No. Oh, no. And if that happens, we're going to have a big problem, right? I'm going to talk to the news about this. I'm going to make sure that there's a lot of heat brought down on this school if my child is being mistreated. That is what an engaged parent does. Schools don't actually want those parents because those parents, again, are a pain in the ass. What they want are docile parents who allow their child to just do whatever the school says should be done. That's not what I'm about, and that's not what's going to help young people, particularly lower income Black and brown kids, get a shot at a brighter future. So those are all the things I'm working on. The unifying theme is the role of the parent and the role of the child in their own education. So that's kind of how I'm focusing my time.
Amazing. And what do you think your future holds? Like, what would you like to do in the next 5 years, let's say?
Yeah, well, one book that I would recommend to you, COVID, and to anybody else who listens to this is called Working Out Loud. I can't remember the author, but the book is about when you're doing your work, whatever that work is, if you care about it, start to help other people understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, and try to essentially serve other people. So, COVID, I know you have a lot of skills, a lot of interest in project management and technology. I would encourage that you begin to write about that, to help people learn the skills that you have, not as a salesperson, but as you're trying to serve them and help them learn how to do the things you do. What I've noticed that as I started writing over the last 2 years, and really writing in this framework of how do I help other parents through my writing? How do I help teachers who are struggling and who are frustrated because their parents aren't engaged? How do I help them? And so a lot of my writing is really around inspiring and equipping parents and teachers, administrators, whomever reads it, on how to bring parents into this educational process more. So Working Out Loud is the process of writing about, videoing, podcasts, all about the things that matter to you. And your goal is to find other people who care about the same things that you care about. And so me going forward, I am realizing there's millions of people out there who believe in some of the things I believe. And I don't really know where this is going to go. All I know is I'm increasingly connecting with people who believe in these things. Now, here's the last piece about where I'm headed that is really counterintuitive, but it is entirely true. All of the opportunities that have come to me in my entire life have been organically driven. What I mean by that is I never planned on getting an administrative job at a hospital. I had some connections. Those connections, when I called them and said, hey, I'm looking for a job, they said, hey, have you considered this? Hey, what about this? Maybe you should talk to these people. So that's an organic process. My point for you, and again, anybody else that's listening, is we have to lean into that organic opportunities. So as I am writing and as I'm building a network of people, this youth entrepreneurship program or youth entrepreneurship award was an organic opportunity that came up, wasn't something that was even on my radar. I happened to write a story about some young men that I met who were trying to sell me candy in a vacation spot in Texas. And I wrote about them and said, how do we help these young men? And some of the people who I'm connected with said, hey, we need to encourage entrepreneurship. It is the best way to learn, on and on. My point is that that's how this opportunity came up. So if you, COVID, or anyone listening, want to build opportunities for themselves, it's about being a service to others first. And as you serve other folks, the world and the universe will bring that benefit back to you in ways that they are unpredictable and you can't plan for, but it absolutely happens. So my future, no idea. All I know is I'm going to keep serving, and as opportunities come up, I'm going to consider them and lean into them if there's something that's aligned with my interests. And actually, let me tell you another quick thing that's kind of come up recently. COVID, our school district has been taken over by the state of Texas due to poor performance. 200,000 kids, 260 schools are involved here. Huge $2 billion budget. It's getting taken over by the state. And now I'm probably going to apply to be part of the state leadership. Now, what will happen there? I have no idea. But what I'm committed to is being an advocate for parents. And if I am selected to be on that role, I've got thousands of people who share my interest in parents that I can say, hey, listen, I need your help. How do we change education where parents and kids now have much more ownership and decision-making authority? What does that look like? That's where I'm heading. I don't know if I'll get chosen. I don't know what's going to happen. But I am supremely confident that if I keep trying to serve others in the areas that I care about, it's going to come back to me. And I'm not worried about that.
Hard agree on that. I think we share a lot of philosophies around that. Do you think you'll be able to change the system from within if you do get selected? Are you hopeful about that?
No, I'm actually not hopeful. There are so many pillars of support that keep the system from changing. That's why we've had this problem for so long. What I'm hopeful, though, is that I can bring a lot of other people into the conversation. Right. To me, there's two words that keep coming to mind when I think about a system this large. One is transparency. So when you're that big, it's easy to just hide problems and move problem leadership from one place to another, and they just kind of get buried. I want to bring a radical level of transparency. Like I would love for every parent to realize just how their child is actually performing, not how the school is performing, because frankly, nobody cares how a school is performing if the kids or my kid is not doing well. The other thing is transformation. This whole Chat GPT conversation, it's finally like kicking everybody in the butt. No one can now say the world is not going to change. And so we got to keep teaching kids the way we've taught them for the last 125 years. Now we have to ask the question, okay, what does education look like when technology is ubiquitous? When I'm having a one-on-one conversation with a guy who I've never met, who lives many thousands of miles away, and I know you and I trust you and I could potentially do work, and actually we have done work together, right? That is a completely different world. And we can no longer look at education as a provincial, the 20 or 30 kids in your classroom and competing against one another. No, that doesn't work anymore. So what does transformation look like? I think it really blows up the model into something ridiculously different. And I'm hoping that there will be pockets of people who say, yeah, we want to try something different. We may not change the whole system, but if we can change pockets, and those pockets can show people a different way, then I think more and more people might gravitate towards those very different learning experiences because they're going to prepare their kids in a radically better and radically different way.
Yeah, I think those who do not change with the transformation I think is so radical that those who don't change are just gonna get left behind. Like I really don't think there's a choice now anymore. So
well, and yeah, I could not agree more. The issue there is I'm not going to force a parent or child to make the transition. I'm going to try to make the case and let them know that when the world's changing quickly, the most risky thing you can do is to keep doing the old, right? So I've talked to some parents about this, COVID. When the automobile was first invented, there were a lot of people who were firmly committed to the horse and buggy, right? And they were committed. They trained their kids on how to take care of horses, how to manage and support the buggy, right? And they were committed to that. But within a very short period of time, everybody that was committed to the old got left behind. They got outcompeted. And what I'm hoping is that the parents who actually have the most to gain from parents who are struggling the most in the current model are the first to get on board with the new model, right? Are the first to transition because they know they're going to get screwed in the current model. And those parents now, their kids are learning tech. Their kids are learning how to leverage Chat GPT. Their kids are learning how to connect with people all over the world. Their kids are learning how to communicate through audio, through visual, through written word. That's what I'm hoping will happen. Their kids are learning that they have personal interests in certain areas and they go deep because they love it and they're communicating with people around the world about it. That is the future. And it is so possible, but it requires parents to realize it's an opportunity, and it requires parents to pull their kids away from all the time suck, not all, but a lot of the time suck that's happening in the traditional model, so the kid has the freedom to do this. COVID, I met a young woman. She's 13 years old. She lives in Pakistan. She reached out to me 2 years ago to interview me. And she had interviewed, I think, 300 people from all over the world at that moment. And she was just learning. This was her learning journey. She was just finding people on LinkedIn who were interesting, who had a voice. And she said, hey, can you spend an hour talking to me about what you've learned about, in my case, education and healthcare? And like, her learning is amazing. She's connected now with people all over the world. She's getting opportunities that are just emerging in ways that she could never have predicted. My understanding is she's going to be in the States in the next year or so, and I'm absolutely going to try to meet her. 13 in Pakistan, connecting with people all over the world. What's possible for any other kid? And a girl, by the way, right? In a culture that is very, patriarchal. So these are the opportunities, and they are right there for people to take if they realize the opportunities are there.
Absolutely.
It's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I agree. The world is changing at a rapid rate, and I can't be more excited for it.
Yeah, and scary. Let's be honest. It's kind of scary too.
It is. I think that'll tie into what I'd like to get some advice at the end of this video, and I think that'll tie into it. But yeah, so I have a few things that I want to tell you from my side. A few stories
Please.
that I thought about while you were speaking. And I'll take some time to explain what I want to do or I want to become, and it's also very similar to what you're doing. So I thought that's really interesting, and
Cool.
and then I'll ask you some advice. So one thing that I wanted to share in our last work meeting as well, which is something you talk about, where you would bring things back from the future. So you'd look at what your future holds, and then you'd bring it back, and then you'd make a game plan about it. Same thing which Chris mentioned in our last meeting, and he said that he taught his children to have a conversation with your future self to understand. So a cool thing that kind of happened with me organically, not because somebody taught me this, but just a product of my imagination, is that when I was about in grade 5 or grade 6, I started imagining future selves of me talking to me. Right?
Oh wow.
And this would evolve as I grew, but it would be multiple future variations of me talking to me. And I came up with a rule where if a future self is talking to me, that means that person is not where he should be. Because if he talks to me, then I'm going to make different decisions, and that means my future will be different, which means that person will no longer exist. So there was this whole like rules of future like timeline engagement I made when I was in grade 5, and eventually I made an exception to that rule where I am now allowed to talk to my future selves and take decisions without affecting the future selves, and so that's what happened. But because I
It's
talk,
gonna give you a headache thinking about that too much, bro.
yeah, I used to be wild in when I was younger. I used to spend more time imagining things than in the real world. I used to to tell you a story. I used to create these D&D games in school, right? And
Yeah.
I used to create worlds that were so engaging and immersive that children So basically, everybody, I got everybody hooked. The whole class wanted to sit next to me and play D&D instead of paying attention to the teacher. Eventually, I
Yeah.
decided to make it monetize it. So I would make certain items which would actually have to pay me money. And these are young children, really really small children. They don't have pocket money, and you can't go to your
Yeah.
parents and say, "Can you give me 10 rupees because I need to pay my friend to give for him to give me an imaginary item."
Right. That doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, some people actually started stealing like loose change from their parents to give to me because my world was so immersive. Like I was, so that's the kind of radical thoughts I'd had. In fact, when you were,
Well,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
that's no. You're an entrepreneur. That's you're creating something that people love enough where they want to participate. So keep going. Keep going.
Yes, it actually like brings me back to how you mentioned a lot of the theory behind Youth Entrepreneur Award, like that children making something that they're excited about, learn more about that thing than learning something through school. In middle school, I participated in a project by NASA, and the project was to create alternate civilization for human beings in case Earth collapsed. And
Oh wow.
we made a civilization, and we covered air supply, water supply, food supply. We covered transportation and defense and everything. And I had to do research, so I had the social aspects, economics and society and healthcare and education. And I researched so much, what made humans go away, what were the changes we needed to make. I eventually came up with my own version of what I later realized was communism. And I didn't realize, but I had basically invented communism, and I and I sent it to NASA. I actually got invited. Our team, it was four of us, uh, but
Oh wow.
but we couldn't afford the flight tickets, and we asked the education minister to pay for us, and he refused. So only one of us could go.
Oh,
But
oh.
it was interesting. So going
That's
back.
that's what's possible when you get excited about learning.
Exactly. Like that's that's
Yeah.
that that's that's the most I've learned because I was so excited to build that world. So
I have no doubt.
going back to conversations with my future self, because I had conversations not just with COVID 10, 15 years from now, but also 1, 2 years from now, I began
Yeah.
becoming the people I was having conversations with in the past. And because I did this so many times, I I I then started to almost project what I would be like in the future because I've had this conversation many times with, quote unquote future versions of me. So I began to almost establish a link between past me and future me and almost start predicting what future me would look like because there's a lot of trial and error involved in the past, and now I can see where I'm headed. Um, so,
That's awesome.
so
I'm taking some notes here.
so using these things, I started wondering where I wanted to go, and I realized that what I really want to do is quite early on. And again, this is very similar to your story, preferably before I'm 30. I want to become financially independent, and I want to
Hmm.
spend my life doing three or four things. Number one is I want to travel the world. I want to see everybody and every place to exist. I want to meet a lot of people. I want to learn a lot of things about everything. I want to learn all the skills in the world, and I want to raise very healthy children. I, I've observed. So my mother died when I was younger. I was in grade four at the time,
Hmm.
and
Oh,
I have been raised entirely by my father. And this man worked for really really long hours, really long hours. It was a very demanding job, and he still
hmm.
made time to what I believe was give me an amazing childhood. We'd go on these
Hmm.
evening walks, and he'd tell me about pearls of wisdom that I cherish to this day. Um,
Wow.
so one of the greatest gifts I was able to give, thankfully, is because I didn't go to college. I started earning early on after I graduated high school. I was able to
Yeah.
gift my father an early retirement. So if I went to college, he'd have to sponsor me and wait for some time until I graduate and get placed.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but my father right now, he's enjoying himself. He's visiting people. He's traveling around. He retired. Both of his
Oh.
sons now earn money. So so that's what I want to do, right? And I the way to do that is to earn a lot of money early on, and there's a few different ways of doing that. And what I'm trying to figure out is how to get there. I am more of I don't think I'll be somebody who works for extended years at a time, or at least I'll take a long vacation in between. Like I think it'll be similar to what you do, where after I start having children, most of my time will be concentrated on raising those children. Um,
Yeah.
but before that, I need to do something to ensure that I'm financially strong. So that's like the big,
Well,
the sort of life goals where of what I'm trying
do
to
you
have.
want some feedback on that, or some of my thoughts, or?
Yeah, sure. I have specific questions, but I'd love some general advice as well.
Well, let me give you two, one, maybe three. The first is you need to read this guy named Naval Ravikant. Have you heard his name before? Is that the almanac?
Yeah,
Yes, yes. Okay, good.
it's literally
So,
right next to my laptop.
so this dude, I tell you, yes, you already know. So he talks about leverage, and leverage is what I was getting at with this working out loud. Leverage is video. Like, so I don't know what you plan on doing with this video, but this is something that can go out and be available forever and can be tied to you and can help to create some connection between yourself and others. And so that's the type of leverage, one of the types of leverage that he talks about. The other is ownership. And so to the degree that you own something, that's where actually financial, uh, uh, independence actually lives. Um, Working for others means they become financially independent off of your labor. And sometimes you have to do that, of course. But the degree to which you can be an owner, and that's, consultants are owners, creatives are owners. It's just a matter of if they have enough income to support themselves. Another piece to that is really living in such a way that that doesn't cause you to start to spend money in order to keep up with everybody else. Um, so those are a couple thoughts. Oh, and then on the travel side, there's a guy who I might recommend Miguel. I can't remember his last name. I'll try to get you his information. But he left his home when he was 17 with no money, and has been traveling the world since. And he's now in his 30s, married. He has written a couple books. He did not come for much, but he learned how to travel ridiculously cheap, and he would make money in the country he was in enough to finance his next move. And so part of me says that travel vision, you can kind of do that whenever you feel you're ready. And I wish I had done more of that, and I wish my kids would do that, because the learning involved, the connections, the
Huge,
relationships building, the
huge.
stories you'll tell, in incredible,
Yep.
right? So, couple thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, what are your specific questions?
No, I
And I've got a
agree.
call in. I've got a call in 13 minutes, so we'll need to shut it down then. So,
Yep.
what specific questions do you
Me
have?
too. I have a call in 12 minutes. So, um, I agree. I think the way to do this is to take ownership. The thing is, I've been having these doubts about, and this is kind of against everything that the work I do and what I stand for. I've been having these doubts about the sustainability of this, of the work that I do, and I wonder if I'll need to make a very large pivot at some point. And if I do that, then I again have to start from zero and then build my way up. Like how do I scale this to a situation where I have enough to almost retire? Not retire, but like at least take a long vacation at 30.
So, I mean, I don't think I would put a time bar on it. I
Yep.
think I would, um, and I might rephrase the question a little bit to how much can you serve others? Can you serve enough people in enough way, in enough create enough value through your service that that independence um, becomes possible. And independence can look different, by the way. So one way to think about independence is and Naval talks about this, I have enough money in the bank that I can draw from that money forever. That's one way of thinking about independence. Another is that you found work that you enjoy, and so it doesn't feel like work because it's something that you enjoy. And a third way is to drive your expenses down so low that you can live on basically zero or close to zero. Those are the kind of the three options. My argument is the second one, the creating of um, working in areas that you care about. That is the most likely, I think. Creating enough money that's in a bank that's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of time. So what I know about you, COVID, is you're a problem solver. I would encourage you to think about 5 businesses you may or may not know, or businesses that you may have a light connection with. Mine, I mean, I don't have a ton of extra resources, but Matt Bowman's, others, Michael Strong. I mean, just people who you know, and study their business and come up with value. Like, here's what I can do for your company, and then do it without asking for payment. And or do it and say, here's the first batch, and if you'd like more of this, then let's talk about payment. So what you're doing is essentially you're creating value, and then you're trusting that that value will come back to you at some point. It may not be immediate, but it's going to come back. So if you can think about some of those companies and research them and find out where they have problems they don't even realize, or opportunities unexplored, or revenue options. Matt Bowman mentioned something to you that he's like, oh, what about India? Is that a possibility? Maybe, maybe not. What about, I don't know, another country? Maybe, maybe not. Like, there may be opportunities out there. If you were able to bring that to him, I'd be willing to bet that he would go, all right, well, let's figure something out, right? So that's what I would encourage you to start to transition yourself into. I'm going to solve these individuals or these groups' problems, and I'm going to be the best problem solver that they will find, and I'm going to bring a solution to a problem they may or may not even realize they have. Or I'm going to start talking to people and just want to understand the problems you have, right? Can I schedule time with you? What are your top 3 problems? That's all I want to know. And I'd like to do some research on them, and maybe I'll bring solutions to you, whether, here's a free solution, right?
I love that. I love,
Yeah.
what are your top 3 problems? That's all I want to know.
And you are the perfect person to do it. I mean, I've worked with you enough to know that within a very short period of time, you're going to identify problems and solve them in ways that leverage your ability. And if you do that enough, you're good at it. I think you like it. That is the type of work that maybe doesn't feel like work to you, but to other people it might. And if you're doing that, twice a week, 5 times a week, I don't know. Maybe you are now free, right? Maybe you're able now to travel, and you still have some projects you're working on. And maybe if you have kids, maybe you're able to do all that and be a committed dad as well. Serve first, and solve problems first, and then by the way, that also creates your portfolio. I've researched Matt Bowman's deal and realized that there's these opportunities. He didn't bite on it, he didn't take it, but here are opportunities that I found for him. Here's the costs that he had opportunities to make, and here's the type of work that I do: solve problems.
Yeah.
I would also write about some of the work you've done for me about problem solving, the problems that you're seeing in different parts of our work. I mean, release yourself into that space, and I think you're going to have a lot of energy, and I think you're going to solve a lot of problems that will be very, very well received.
Great. Yeah. That's good advice. Thank you. I think the parts of this I do already, but I think I need to do more of this. And one thing that I really need to understand is how to. I really need to serve more people, right? Like I need to do this as much as possible. So I think that just begins with sending a bunch of emails to a lot of people and asking them what their problems are and start solving them,
Yeah, and maybe again making it public, right?
making
So,
it public.
right. So, if we schedule another call and you want to use me as an example, you could start by just making a post on LinkedIn or whatever your preferred social media site, and branding yourself as a problem solver. And you call me, and we schedule a call, and you say, Matt, what are the problems you're having? And I go, geez, I don't even know. I mean, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm doing. And you start to go, okay, what I'm hearing is this and this. And, okay, cool. Let me come back to you, and can we schedule another call in a week? And I'll give you some ideas.
Super
Right.
cool.
That would be an interesting. That would be an interesting.
Yeah.
2 videos that would be showing up on your website. Do the same with others and be the problem solver.
Like one of our
I don't
meetings,
know.
but available to the public.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, this
Yep.
is good advice. Thank you. I have.
Okay. Well, it's not my advice, but it's others' advice that I've heard about and it absolutely works. So what else do you have?
One
we
last
only got a
question
couple
for you.
minutes.
One last question for you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of societal pressure in India, and it's not just academic or career oriented. It's a very large system which, if I start explaining, will take a lot of time. But essentially, the value of a college degree transcends the career or professional benefits. It's a societal thing. What are your thoughts on getting a college degree for me, for my life and my goals personally? And I'm thinking
Yeah.
something like a business degree.
Yeah. So, there's different forms. Again, Naval talks about leverage. We need to think broadly about leverage. And a college degree can be a form of leverage. And you know what I mean by leverage, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Something that benefits you without you doing any more labor on it, right?
yeah,
So it can provide leverage. The question is really the cost benefit of it. So if, for example, and I don't know much about the university structure there in India, but I have no doubt that you would do well if you were doing stuff that mattered to you, or even if not, you're smart enough where you could just figure it out, right? So I'm agnostic about the degree, but I would recommend everybody really think long and hard about how do I pay for it? How do I use it to the maximum leverage? So, for example, if you are getting a degree, we got 1 minute left or so, right?
yeah,
Yep. If you are getting a degree, can you build a huge network through that university experience, right? Where you're writing about what you're learning, you're writing about, your subjects, you are connecting with everybody on that campus and other campuses, you're forming groups, you're forming clubs, you're doing entrepreneurial activities, like you really extract the benefit of that. Okay, that becomes more valuable. If you're just getting the degree just to have it, that seems like it may not be so valuable. But leverage, keep thinking about how do I leverage myself and leverage these skills and opportunities I have. That's my recommendation.
So take the college experience also as an entrepreneurial venture.
Exactly. Yep. And how do I build it? How do I make that experience something that's not just a checkbox,
Yeah.
but something that I now have exploded into something much more valuable, where the degree actually is just the smallest part of the value. I now have these connections. I have these, portfolios that I've been able to build, etc.
Awesome. All right, that was the last of
All
my
right.
questions.
All right, cool. Well, happy to talk more in the future, brother.
Thank you. Thank you so much
I'm
for your
I'm a
time.
fan.
No, I'm a
You're
fan.
welcome.
It was really nice talking to you, and I really appreciate your advice. Thank you so much.
Good. We'll meet in person when